Hello, everybody. My name is Brady Lund.
My name is Daniel Agachi.
We are both Masters of Library Science students at the School of Library and Information Management here at Florida State University. And our topic today is why do you use that to classify? Assessing academic library faculty and staff preferences for our Dewey Decimal and Library of Congress system classification. So there's several topics we want to discuss throughout our research process. And we have laid those out in our outline here. We'll give you a brief background on why the project started. We'll discuss the questions that arose from our original discoveries. We'll talk about how we recruited a pool of research participants and the results that we were able to find, and then some conclusions and some theory practices that we just uncovered as part of our research.
Yeah, very interesting.
And so, as you said, my name is Brady Lund. He's Daniel. We're both MLS students here. I got my degree, my undergraduate degree at Wichita State University.
And I got my undergraduate degree at Federal University of Technology, Mina, back in Nigeria.
So we come from very different backgrounds, but we both had the same experience when we were at the library school at Florida State University. We both entered the stacks here at William Allen White Library, and we noticed that they use Dewey Decimal classification for their library collections, which is very unusual. In fact, I've never experienced that in any academic library I've ever visited. And I believe Daniel.
Yeah, the same thing with me actually. When I came over to the library, it was like a puzzle getting a book, and it was very difficult for me to do that, and I kept asking a lot of questions.
So the question's been asked somewhat superficially before. What are the causes for preferring one classification scheme over the other? And a lot of the times, financial and time considerations will get put out there as rationale. It's cheaper to use such and such system, or we use this system and not the other because it's too expensive to change from one to another. But it doesn't really look into detail as to what the perspective of the library employees is and what kinds of sociological and psychological factors influence those decisions to classify. We also don't know how many academic libraries use it. So through the process of our research, we wanted to identify an updated percentage. As you'll see in our following slides here, only 3 really comprehensive measures of classification scheme use have been taken in modern history. And the first was in 1955, second in 1975, and third in 1995, 20 years apart each time. In the first measure, they found that some 77% of academic libraries use Dewey classification. 20 years later, in 1975, they found that only 47% do it. That's a drop of almost half. Finally, in 1995, they found that 25% of academic libraries use Dewey. Again, that's a drop of almost 50%. So we see this trend that about every 20 years, we see a drop in about 50%.
Which is very drastic for them, actually.
It's a drop of about 1.5 to 2% of academic libraries per year switching from Dewey to library offerings. And so we want to know, okay, we're 22 years out from the last measure, we want to know what's the percentage now. We also want to know what do academic library employees prefer. We want to know if that has a factor in the decision to reclassify.
Yeah.
And after we know whether academic library employee preferences affect the classification scheme decision, we also want to know how did those preferences form. We think that can inform a lot more than just classification preferences. It can tell us a lot about the psychology of librarians and inform even marketing strategies and business decisions. And so we have 2 kind of almost separate studies that we conducted here. The first was to find that percentage. The second was to find the perception. And so to find the percentages, we did rather straightforward. The past studies had just taken a sampling of some 200 libraries and tried to extrapolate that to all the academic libraries in the United States. We went comprehensive. So we visited the websites of every academic library in the United States, which are 3,793. We searched the recent holdings to determine whether they used Dewey or LC. And if we cannot determine that, then we contacted an employee directly, cataloging them, find that information. To find preferences, we conducted a nationwide survey. So we created a survey in Qualtrics. They asked several demographic questions, basically your experience, what type of position you work in, how much training you have, education you have, where are you geographically, all sorts of demographic questions. Because we're trying to answer both the first question, what are the preferences, and the second question, what contributes to those preferences. We also asked about 5 questions about different types of preferences. And so by that I mean, we asked, do you prefer this system or this system based on the ease to use? Do you prefer this system or this system based on your experience as an academic library user? We're trying to look for as many differentiating factors as possible that might give us a hint as to why preferences form. So we are rather successful in our quest to get a large pool for our research. We in fact got over 800 participants across the United States. And we were able to do that mostly by contacting individuals directly through email. And a very helpful tool for that was the email instructor that's able to put emails from websites you visit and store those email addresses so you can just create a mailing list directly on your computer. The results for the first part of the study, we found that 13.5% of academic libraries use Dewey Decimal Classification. That's a drop from 25% 22 years ago, and so on. It falls right in line with that drop of about 50% every 20 years. And so we see the rate is not necessarily declining or increasing at a statistically significant rate, falling right in line with that decline of about 1.5% to 2% of libraries reclassifying per year. When we look at preferences, we see in our quantitative analysis that Library of Congress classification is strongly preferred among academic libraries. In fact, it's a very substantial difference, 83% to 6% favoring Dewey. However, when we conduct our statistical analyses, we also looked at the backgrounds of these librarians and where they were currently working and looked at all those demographic factors. And one interesting effect that we found was that there is a very strong correlation between the system used by the library you work for and the system you prefer. So if you work at a Library of Congress institution, then you prefer Library of Congress. If you work at a Dewey institution, typically you prefer Dewey. And we also see that Dewey is only used in 13.5% of libraries. And so we believe, based on our evidence and our statistically significant results, that there is a strong connection between your exposure to a system and your preference for a system. And that is not necessarily based on a very broad and detailed analysis of the system. From a practical standpoint, be applied in libraries and even beyond libraries, this could indicate something about the psychology of the employees and that their familiarity with the system affects their preference for a system. And that could, of course, have several major impacts on purchasing decisions, whether purchasing electronic or print resources, are we adopting new technologies or not? It might be based on the institution we work for and what their tradition has been. And so we see that a lot of factors in libraries can potentially be affected by what is known in psychology as the mere exposure effect or the familiarity principle. So those are our research and results in a nutshell. We're happy to answer any questions if you have them.